My name is Robert Allen Green. I'm 71 years old. A retired construction foreman who spent 4 decades building other people's homes while quietly praying that my own family would never forget the man who built the very roof over their heads. But life has a strange way of testing patience, respect, and the dignity of an old man. Because after my wife Linda passed away 5 years ago, my relationship with my son, Daniel, slowly shifted from warmth to tension, from respect to obligation, and from family to something that felt like a landlord dealing with an inconvenient tenant. And I never imagined that one day after everything I sacrificed, that my own flesh and blood would stand in front of me in the house I worked overtime to buy, paid off with my bare hands and maintained with every aching muscle, and tell me with a straight face, "Dad, it's time you start paying rent." It all began the day I returned home from my doctor's appointment, walking a little slower than usual because of my knees, and found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, acting like he was preparing a business presentation instead of talking to his own father. And when I sat across from him, he didn't ask how my appointment went, didn't ask how I was feeling, but instead pushed a folder toward me and said, "We need to talk about contributions." And when I looked inside, there was an itemized list: utilities, food, wear and tear of the house, and then bold and highlighted, monthly rent, $1,200, as if I were some stranger he had reluctantly agreed to host. My heart sank, not because of the money, I had more than enough saved, but because of what it meant, what it said about how he viewed me now. I asked him gently what brought this on, and he sighed like I was burdening him, telling me that things were tight, that he and his wife, Marissa, needed space, that everyone needs to contribute, and I listened quietly while he spoke to me like a tenant behind on payments. And not once did he mention that this house, the one he grew up in, the one where he learned to ride his bike in the driveway, the one where his mother used to bake cinnamon rolls every Sunday, belonged to me. Bought 30 years ago, paid off long before he ever had facial hair. And still, I stayed calm because something inside me wanted to see just how far he was willing to go. So I asked, "And what if I can't pay rent, son?" And he shrugged and said, "Then we'll have to make other arrangements." Which was the moment my chest tightened with the realization that he was talking about moving me out. His own father, as if I were disposable furniture taking up space. I looked at him, trying to find some trace of the boy who used to run to me after school. The boy who cried when he lost his first baseball game. The boy who once said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," but that boy was gone, replaced by a man shaped by convenience, by money, by a marriage where Marissa's whisper mattered more than a father's wisdom. And I knew right then that this wasn't Daniel's idea alone. So I decided not to argue, not yet, because battles won in patience last longer than battles fought in anger. I took the papers quietly, nodded, and said I'd figure things out. And for the next week, I watched how they behaved, watched how Marissa avoided eye contact, how Daniel spoke to me with rehearsed firmness, how they both assumed I was old, tired, powerless, and unaware of what authority I still held. But they had forgotten one thing: the house was still in my name, solely mine. And they had never checked the deed because they assumed, foolishly, that ownership shifted magically just because they lived there. On Friday, as they sat in the living room discussing new furniture for the living room makeover they planned to do once I started paying rent, I quietly walked to my study, opened the locked cabinet where the deed had rested for decades, and placed it carefully in a folder. The next morning I invited someone they never expected to see, my lawyer, Mr. Hensley, the same man who helped me finalize my retirement assets. And when he walked into the house, Daniel and Marissa froze, confused, unsure whether I was updating my will or selling something. And Daniel asked sharply, "Dad, what's going on?" And I simply replied, "A conversation we should have had before you tried to charge me rent." We sat at the table, me, Daniel, Marissa, and Mr. Hensley, just like Daniel had wanted earlier that week, except this time the tone was mine to set, and I slid the property deed across the table toward my son. As he read the words, his whole posture shifted. His face drained. His arrogance evaporated. And then came the moment, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Dad, The house is yours? And I nodded slowly, replying, "It always has been, Daniel." "You never asked because you assumed," and Marissa tried to argue, saying it wasn't fair, that they were building a future. And I looked straight at her and said, "You don't build a future by disrespecting the past," leaving her speechless. Then, in a calm, steady voice, I told them both exactly how things were going to work. There will be no rent. If anything, you both should be contributing to my household because this isn't your property. I allowed you to live here out of love, not obligation. And if living with me feels like a burden, then you are free to find another place." They sat in stunned silence. And Daniel, for the first time in years, looked like a boy who realized he had crossed a line he never should have approached. He tried to apologize, rambled about stress and Marissa's pressure and financial problems. But apologies born from fear mean nothing, and I told him gently but firmly, "Respect isn't something you remember when it's convenient." That evening, the house was quieter than ever. Marissa hid in their bedroom and Daniel hovered near the kitchen trying to make small talk, but the damage was done. Over the next few days, their behavior changed entirely. They cooked for me, cleaned without being asked, checked on me, but I didn't trust sudden kindness driven by guilt. Heart change doesn't happen overnight. A week later, they sat me down, genuinely this time. And Daniel apologized with tears, saying he forgot what I had done for him, forgot that I was still his father, not a rent-paying roommate, and for the first time in a long while, I saw honesty in his eyes. I forgave him, because fathers always forgive, but I never forgot. Respect, once lost, is rebuilt slowly. And as I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the house I'd built, I realized something powerful. Sometimes children need to be reminded that the hands they push away are the same hands that held them when they couldn't stand. My son told me to start paying rent, but he forgot one thing. I built this house, paid for it, lived in it, and no one, not even my own blood, gets to evict the man who laid its foundation.